drive, you keep a sharp lookout for parking spaces on the other side of the street. I'll watch this side.
I am, Harry. Oh, there's one right over in front of Schiffeldecker's department store.
Uh-huh.
Oh, Harry, look out.
Quiet. Who's driving this car anyway?
You are. But you almost took that man's fender off. He didn't expect you to turn around in the middle of the block.
I'll leave us not be mind readers.
Oh.
How you know what he expected?
Harry, that blue car is going to try and get into our parking space.
Oh, no, he isn't. I saw it first. Well, I got my front wheels in. He can't squeeze in now.
Don't back up. He's trying to get past you.
Boy, will I be glad when the time comes when I can have a nice little helicopter all my own, and I won't have to wear myself out like this.
Listen, even if you had a rocket ship, you'd probably still be fighting with somebody over the right-of-way around Mars or Saturn or someplace.
And no doubt our friend would have to learn a little space navigation before he could follow the directions to be given in this particular excursion in science. Hitch your rocket to a star. The story behind that title is the concern of our science reporter, Emerson Markham. How come we'll be considering space navigation, Emerson?
Well, Bob, it's really an outgrowth of a very interesting chat I had with Peter Schuyler Miller on that subject. He pointed out, first of all, that the average person is ready to take navigation on the sea or in the air pretty much for granted. After all, any trick that can be worked with a watch and a sheet of paper or a cardboard circle and a pin can't be too complicated.
But when you get out into space, it's a different story to John Q. Citizen, eh?
It is indeed. When someone tries to project navigation into a Buck Rogers future, when rocket ships cruise through space like clippers over the Pacific, our average citizen throws up his hands in holy terror. And one look at the thousands of stars which sprinkle the sky on a frosty winter night makes the problem seem terrifically complicated. How can anyone ever find his way among all those stars?
You're asking me?
Well, as a matter of fact, Bob, space navigation, or astrogation, if you like a fancy name, should be easier than navigation on the surface of a planet like the Earth.
Yes, but Emerson, do you think it'll be possible to go flying around in space anyway?
This is neither the time nor the place to argue the possibility of space flight, Bob, or predict when the first filling station will be opened on the moon. Perfectly sane and competent scientists can quote figures and write formulas to prove that it is possible right now, even with present fuels, to go to the moon or Mars or almost anywhere else you may care to go.
Is that so?
Yes. The only catch is that the cost of a moon rocket is about on a par with the pre-war price of a good big battleship, if not higher.
So we're back to just about where we started, the way it looks to me.
Well, for the sake of our discussion, let's assume that some up-and-coming experimenter has tapped an adequate source of atomic power, so that costs have come down to the point where rocket ships can run on a regular schedule like luxury liners. Just how would the rocket's navigator, or astrogator, go about finding his way from planet to planet?
And how about asking me a question I can answer for James?
If you were Buck Rogers, and you were setting out for Mars in a rocket, it might seem reasonable to suppose that you would simply aim the nose of the ship at the red planet, start the motor, and hang on. Maybe Buck does just that. I haven't followed his adventures in quite a while. But the practical space skipper, who has to stay inside his fuel budget and run his ship on schedule, certainly won't.
Indeed, and what would said astrogator do?
Well, let's take an illustration first. Somewhere in the mathematics books there is a favorite problem about a boy and a dog. The boy is walking along a country road, whistling to his pup who is off in the fields chasing rabbits. The dog hears him, lets out a few answering yelps, bounces up and down a few times until he catches sight of his master, and sets out to catch up with him. If the dog always heads straight to the boy, who keeps on walking along the road, the poor pup will have to follow a curved path, which takes him longer and farther than if he'd had the sense to cut crosslots and intercept his master somewhere along the road.
A moral, it isn't always best to take the straight path.
And that moral applies to rockets in space, Bob. If you point your ship directly at Mars, you will find your target running away from you at a speed of about 900 miles a minute. You have to chase it. And as the pirate stories all tell us, a stern chase is a long chase. What's more, it's a very expensive chase because you must constantly turn your ship to follow the escaping planet, and that uses up fuel. When you run out of gas in a bomber, you can bail out. When you run out of fuel in space, you simply keep on going forever, and forever can be a long, long time.
Well, now let's get down to a concrete example, Emerson. Suppose I wanted to go to Mars. How'd I go?
The practical way to get to Mars, Bob, is to do what the dog should have done. Head for where the planet is going to be at the time you reach its orbit.
Oh, fine. Of course, I'd know just where that would be.
Well, the astronomers have had all the details of that question worked out for centuries and can tell you exactly where you should be, when. And they will tell you that if you follow their instructions, you can coast most of the way and save your fuel for taking off and landing.
Yes, but it would seem to me there'd be more to it than that.
Well, of course there is. I'm reliably informed that it isn't wise to jump off a merry-go-round when it is traveling at top speed. I haven't tried it. Nevertheless, that is exactly what the canny space skipper does if he wants to save a maximum of fuel and has plenty of time to spare.
Now, Emerson, jump off a merry-go-round at top speed.
Figuratively speaking, yes. You see, the Earth is whirling around the sun with a speed of about 18.5 miles a second. Now, if he takes off at just the right time and in just the right direction, the Earth will flip his rocket into space with almost all the speed he needs to reach Mars, just as the merry-go-round will flip a careless youngster head over heels into dust.
I see what you mean, I think. But where does that coasting you mentioned come in?
When I said that a spaceship can coast, I meant exactly that. No energy, no fuel of any kind is needed to keep the planets circling in their orbits around the sun. The gravitational attraction with which the sun drags them to it is exactly balanced by the centrifugal force with which their speed through space tries to hurl them away from the sun. Now, once it has blasted itself free of the gravitational pull of the Earth, a rocket ship is just another tiny planetoid with an orbit all its own, pulled by the sun and counteracting that pull by its speed. Our astrogator has only to calculate what orbit his ship needs to follow in order to intercept Mars at the proper place and proper time. And the astronomers back at the spaceport will probably do that for him before they clear the ship.
Yes, but how can they figure it out?
Well, Dr. Miller showed me an article by R.S. Richardson of the Mount Wilson Observatory, which appeared in a science fiction magazine. It explains it very well. By the way, Dr. Richardson himself pointed out that astronomers since the time of Newton have understood the laws governing the motions of the planet so thoroughly that the information was always available. Anyway, Mr. Miller says that he thinks Dr. Richardson's article may turn out to be a kind of a primer for future astrogators.
Enough of these bouquets, Emerson. Let's have the story.
Very well. The space skipper who chooses the cheapest route from Earth to Mars, Dr. Richardson points out, takes off at a tangent to the Earth's orbit so that he gets the full advantage of the home planet's 18.5 miles a second. He needs only a very little fuel to raise his speed the additional few miles a second, which will swing his rocket in an elliptical orbit halfway around the sun to meet Mars 251 days and 338 million miles later. For most of these 251 days, he and his crew need only to sit quietly, playing pinochle, watching for meteors, admiring the stars, and using up the ship's supply of food, water, and air.
An awfully long time to sit around. 251 days.
Yes. Unfortunately, this kind of trip, though cheap in fuel, is expensive in time. Moreover, it can be made only when Earth and Mars are in exactly the right positions in their orbits, so that Mars will be there when the rocket arrives. Fortunately for interplanetary commerce, there are an infinite number of other orbits which a spaceship can follow.
Then the question is, which one is best?
The closer the two planets are together in space, the more time it will save in making the trip and the more fuel it must use. To meet Mars a quarter instead of halfway around its orbit, the rocket must head almost directly away from the sun instead of in the direction of the Earth's motion, so that the combination of the Earth's speed and the rocket's own velocity will send it in the proper direction. Now, this trip, according to Dr. Richardson, would take only 156 days, but it would use up 32 times as much fuel as the first course.
Only 156 days, he says. Gosh, can't they better that time?
Apparently about the best that a spaceship can hope to do without sending costs skyrocketing is to meet Mars at a point about 10 degrees along its orbit from the starting point. This trip will take only 88 days and cover only 50 million miles, but it will mean that the captain must not only throw away the free shove the Earth would drive him, but must actually oppose it, and it will cost 382 times more in fuel than the cheap 180-degree course. This express trip by fast rocket is for multi-billionaires only.
Emerson, what happens in space if a rocket gets off its course? How does the astrogator find out where he is?
Oh, that's a simpler job than if you were lost in the middle of the Pacific, Bob. On Earth, a navigator must locate himself on the curved surface of a sphere. Navigating in space is more like traveling on the flat surface of a phonograph record. The orbits of almost all of the planets lie in or close to one plane with the sun at the center. To locate himself on this disk, our astrogator need only find out how far he is from the center, the sun that is, and measure his celestial longitude or direction from the sun.
And how would he accomplish this feat, pray tell?
Taking his sextant to the window, he measures the angle between the sun and some bright fixed star like Regulus in Leo the Lion, which is close to the plane of the planet. He has the longitudes of 50 or 60 of these standard stars in his tables. Subtracting the angle he has measured from 180 degrees gives him the difference between his longitude and that of Regulus, and there he is.
Well, yes, there he is, but where's the sun is the question.
Yes, and finding his distance from the sun requires another shot on some convenient body within the solar system, whose longitude and distance from the sun at all times are given in his table. Well, let's say he picks Mars, and he gets the angle between it and the sun, just as he did with Regulus. He has just found his own longitude, so he has 3 angles and one side of an astronomical triangle. The angle between the sun and Mars, which he has just measured, the angle at the sun between his ship and Mars, which is merely the difference in their longitudes, and the third angle of the triangle by subtraction, plus the distance of Mars from the sun in the table. He can solve the triangle to get the second side, which is his own distance from the sun, but he will probably use a mechanical calculator designed for the job, which won't make careless mistakes. Actually, that's all there is to navigation in interplanetary space. 2 sights with a sextant, a little subtraction, a book of standard tables, and a calculating machine. To make it easier, there's no weather in space to hide the stars or to make the astrogator space safe. He does have to know one star from another, which is a little tougher than it seems when you consider the vastly greater number of faint stars which will be visible once you are clear of the Earth's atmosphere. He should be able to subtract angles, but he can use a machine for that too if he wants to. Personally, I think I like the job.
Well, no doubt you'd have some willing passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to receive a copy of a paper which tells the story of space navigation, which Mr. Markham has just unfolded, all you have to do to receive a copy is address your request to Excursions in Science, in care of the station to which you are now listening, and ask for scientific paper number 139, entitled Hitch Your Rocket to a Star. That's Hitch Your Rocket to a Star, scientific paper number 139. And now, once again, we've come to that portion of our program devoted to the answering of scientific questions sent in to us by you listeners. The answers they receive reflect the most accurate information obtainable, since they are based on facts supplied by staff members of the General Electric Research Laboratory or of other equally reliable sources. Well, Emerson, let's get to work with this one first. The letter contains several questions about eyes and eyeglasses. First, our friend would like to know how glasses aid one's sight.
We wear glasses because the lenses in our eyes are not at the correct focal length. Thus, by adding another lens, the two in combination can be made of the correct focal length.
Glasses for any 2 people exactly the same, our listener next asks.
It'd be very rare indeed that 2 people would have exactly the same glasses.
Then he asks why drops are used to dilate the eyes when they are tested.
Drops are used to dilate the iris so that the oculus can see in back of the eye.
Were the Chinese pioneers in the use of glasses, our friend wants to know next.
We really don't know who invented them, but the Chinese were as early as any to use glasses, Bob.
What about contact lenses, Emerson? Will you explain their use just briefly?
Contact lenses are small lenses placed in direct contact with the eyeball. Thus, you see how they derive their name. The theory of these lenses is no different from the ordinary lenses carried out in front of the eye. They're made in such a form that they are concealed. We understand, however, that they may become irritating after a few hours, so some people find that they cannot be worn continuously.
Now a friend in Union City, Tennessee, would like to know about the draft in the chimney. His next question is, why is the throat in the fireplace narrowed?
Well, it's narrowed mainly because of a matter of convenience and construction, as far as I know. It's narrower than the size of the fireplace, too, probably because of the reduced flue of the chimney.
Second question, is there a cold downdraft in the chimney while the hot draft is going up?
No, there shouldn't be any downdraft. It may be possible, however, depending upon the high velocity of the wind and the position of the house. If the chimney extends, say, above the house, this might tend possibly to reverse the draft in the chimney when there is a high wind.
Now, a lady in Northfield, Vermont writes, During the summer when my hands tan, part of them does not, but remains white. What is the cause, and is there any cure?
In all probability, our correspondent has a skin condition on her hands known as vitiligo, in which the normal pigment of the skin is lacking. This is probably perfectly harmless and is not amenable to treatment.
Well, if we don't start to pick up and leave, our friends around here will start to believe that we're not amenable to a friendly suggestion that we don't run overtime. So I'd better say thank you, Emerson Markham, and goodbye, everyone, until our next excursion in science.